Testing, testing. Is this a White House panic move? Let's take a look at what's going on right now with the tariffs and the White House, and it would appear that the White House is panicking because it would appear that this whole discussion around the tariffs and, more importantly, the cost of food is becoming an issue, believe it or not. Now, why is that? Well, I mean, at the end of the day, when this whole started, we thought that, you know what, this whole tariff thing is going to be a disaster. Why? Well, because you're going to go out, you're going to create uncertainty in the market, and more importantly, what you're going to do is you're going to force a tariff war. And then before you know it, they're gonna the other countries are gonna go around and they're gonna go against you and they're gonna raise their tariffs, and this would not be good. And then on top of that, what you would have seen is the companies in the U.S. on which the tariffs are being impacted, that they in turn would raise their prices. It didn't happen. You know, they all got scared. Most countries, apart from China, basically kind of didn't want to have a fight with the U.S., and they decided very simply to, take their 15% and go home, basically. So that was win number one. Win number two was the fact that the U.S. Companies on which the tariffs were being applied, I mean, they're the one paying the tariffs, by the way, just making sure, they did not raise their prices. So it was a win-win situation for everyone, especially for the White House. And, that was a good thing. That was a very good thing. Except that now what is happening is prices, especially on food, not on everything, but on food, prices on food is going up. And that is a bit of a problem for the U.S. administration. Why is that? Well, it is a problem because it is becoming quite a bit, right? So let's break down, one of the most dramatic policy reversals of the Donald Trump second term, a move that has stunned economists, surprised political insiders, and sent ripple effects through the global supply chain. This is, whoa, what's going on? So the White House, so that you know, has announced massive rollback. And I'm going to tell you that the reason this is happening is because they're panicking. And it's not just, it's panicking as part of their strategy. The strategy is kind of unfolding now. I mean, you got the Epstein thing going on, which we'll talk about. But then you also have the fact that the tariffs themselves are under attack because through the Supreme Court. We'll talk about that at some point. But more importantly, I mean, this is a reversal. I mean, it's a good reversal, I guess. Maybe they're telling you what you want to hear. Is this actually going to happen? Can this actually make a difference in time? Don't forget what we have going on very soon. We have, what do we have? We have the the midterm elections next year, and that's going to be a problem for them. So the White House basically announced a massive rollback of food tariffs over 200 agricultural products, from coffee and beef to bananas, cacao, spices, tomatoes, orange juice, and more. But here's a good question. Is this a genuine attempt to lower grocery prices? Or is this simply a political panic move as American grows frustrated with the cost of living? What's going on? What are they really doing? You know? And let's look into it. Let's try to understand what's happening, because obviously this is important. It's going to impact your pocketbook quite a bit. This is not a small tweak. This is not a symbolic headline. This is full-scale reversal of a major piece of Trump's economic strategy, the very tariffs he spent years arguing were necessary to protect American jobs. So what has changed? Well, the short answer is grocery prices and political pressures. The fact is, I mean, if you've gone to Costco recently, you've seen that the price of steak prices have gone up a lot. So let's understand exactly what happened. So the first thing is what does the White House announce? Well, on November 14th and 15th, the Trump administration announced the rollback of tariffs on a long list of imported food products, more than 200. That's a lot. We're talking coffee, we're talking beef, bananas, chocolate. And by the way, what's going on with beef is not only having to do with what's going on with the tariffs, by the way. But we'll talk about beef at some other time. But the point is, so chocolate and spices and tomatoes, oranges, specialty agricultural items, not what he produced in the U.S. So the new rules apply retroactively to imports brought into the country as to midnight before the announcement. So the White House claims this is part of a broad affordability push, saying Americans are facing unacceptable full price pressures and that certain tariffs no longer serve the national interest. Thank you very much. But the key point is this. They are the same tariffs the administration repeatedly defended as essential for America's economic strength. Well, remember, the idea was, I'm going to tariff these countries, raise the prices of the countries, right? And so that they come to the U.S., they bring, or you buy more in the U.S., right? But it would appear that it's not working out so well as far as food is concerned. And I think this is happening because you are dealing with small items, and you're dealing with many items, and you're dealing with items that you have to have. Therefore, if you're a small manufacturer or producer of tomatoes or bananas or whatever, and you're bringing it over, and you're being charged a lot on the other side because, well, you're being charged in the U.S., but because you bring it from Mexico or whatever, it's costing you more money, then you want to turn around and, well, I mean, I got to charge you. The thing is, because the banana is like $1 and it goes for $1.05, you don't care. $1.10, you don't care. Still $1. But then if you do the same thing with tomatoes and spices and chocolate and coffee, by the time it's starting to add up, and now it's add up to a lot across the board. So it was a slow increase. It's not like you're a car manufacturer and you're importing steel from Brazil or steel from India. And you say, well, you know what? I'm going to turn around and I'm going to increase the price of the car. So now the car goes from $50,000 to $60,000. You don't want that. So the White House, so this is part of a broad affordability push, saying Americans are facing unacceptable. So, but the point is, can this actually happen? Are these the same tariffs Trump repeatedly defended as essential for America's economic strength? So why did the administration reverse course? Well, despite cooling inflation at a macro level, voters overwhelmingly reported one thing. Everything still feels expensive. And the reason everything is still feeling expensive is because things are adding up across the board, especially groceries. You didn't care at the beginning when your Nespresso was 75 cents, went to 80 cents. Well, it's okay. But now it's $1.15. It's starting to hurt. It's starting to hurt, especially if all the other all the other items are being increased as well. So grocery food items, and of course, because it is food, you need it. You need it. So it's politically lethal because this is exactly what this administration blamed the previous administration for. So you got to do something. I think what happened is they didn't pay attention to the details. And they have been adding up slowly. And now it's now it's an issue. I think that's what's happening here. So internal polling, public surveys, recent election results show that food inflation now one of the top main pain points for the U.S. households. Voters blame the White House, regardless of who's right. So the administration is losing support among middle-income suburban voters. That's a problem. And working-class households are expressing frustration across both parties. So listen, this guy's taking too much money. What have you done? Well, I tried the best I could. And it worked. It's just I did not pay attention to the details. I didn't realize that, if you pay for a banana at $1 to $1.05, you don't care. But then the coffee from, an espresso cup from like a $1 to $1.50, that doesn't make too much. And that's not a big deal. But then you lost track of the fact that by the time you add them all together, it's time to make a big difference altogether. And the manufacturers probably realize it. They say, well, they're not saying anything. Let's keep increasing. Even though inflation has come down to the 3% range, the level of prices, not just the rate of change, still hurts. Now, of course, when we talk about inflation, you need to realize one thing is that inflation, when they talk about inflation, what's inflation? Well, it's the price of food, it's the price of housing, and it's the price of energy. So energy has been coming down quite a bit, and that's what they always say. Well, energy has been going down, so inflation is going down. Inflation is in the range. Yeah, but not inflation that I care about, and I care about food. And the advisors reported warned, we cannot run a second-term agenda while Americans feel like they're being crushed at the grocery store. That's right, and that's why the White House pivoted. The tariff reversal is part of a broader effort to signal, we hear you, we're doing something about affordability. Now, you're doing something, yes. We're hearing it. You're going to do something. But can it actually work? How much will this really lower prices? And that's the question you want to know. Removing tariff does reduce costs for the importers. Yes, correct. It reduces your costs. But will grocery store prices actually drop? Not necessarily and not immediately. If you keep buying and keep paying, it's not much of a big deal. Here's why. The reason is grocery chains don't automatically lower prices when their costs fall. Sometimes they keep the difference as a margin. This is working. It's food after all. You got to eat. So many affected items may have other cost drivers. Now, you have to realize, and this is why inflation is a very dangerous thing, because once it starts going, you can't lower it that quickly. It's not like when you have oil prices going up and down, you see that the pump right away. This is different. Not only it's not just one thing, it's many things, right? Coffee, banana, it's a bunch of different things. So by the time you have a bunch of different items and a bunch of different people and very low cost, so it's very, and then they could always say, well, coffee prices, for example, surged due to A, weather events in Brazil, B, disease in Central American crops, global shipping costs, and higher labor expenses. I mean, the tariff rollback can help, but it's not a magic wand. So you could imagine at the White House, right? I mean, okay, I just reduced the tariffs on coffee, for example. So bring it down. I said, well, hold on, it's not that simple. I mean, I've got the weather was no good. There were diseases, the shipping costs. So I can't. And then people, frankly, are still buying the coffee. They like it, right? So the horse is out of the barn, and now you're trying to bring it back. That is much more difficult. Now, of course, you could say, but I'm doing something. So please remember this when, the midterm election, because that's what they focused on, the midterm elections. And if the administration is not to hold on to that, they are going to lose you know, the MAGA thing, and we took a whole thing about MAGA right now, is not in is a bit of a trouble, as you've heard. We'll talk about the Epstein after. But the point is, right now, they all have issues. So most retailers buy they buy the food months in advance. So these prices are already locked in. So you may see some decrease at some point. But it's not just about the tariffs as well. And this is where the administration is going to have a tough time explaining that, listen, I am working it, but it's not really all just about the tariffs. You know, especially what's happening with the meat prices is not just the tariffs, but the problem is that if the U.S. population thinks that, you know what, this is the tariffs, this is the tariffs, and of course the right, the left is going to say, yeah, that's right, the tariffs are causing all these things. So the administration is going to have to wrestle with the message, and the message might be difficult to pass through. Say, hey, folks, this is not just about the tariffs. We didn't cause this on our own. You know, it's the tariffs, and that's going to be a problem for them. Now, most retailers buy food months in advance, so these prices are locked in, like I just said. For the beef, U.S. producers, not global markets, drive most daily prices. Right? So the ability to lower food prices is extremely limited. Tariffs are one of the very few direct tools he has, and even then the effect is modest. So don't expect a drop in everything right away. So this is why, you know, the view may be more politically driven than economically driven. That means that don't expect. And the problem is, if you think that this is due to the tariffs and you don't see prices going down, then you're going to say it's your fault. But don't forget, I mean, the administration has been in for like a year, right? So things happen in real life. Look at the story about the beef alone. Beef is not going up, and not because of the tariffs. And I know when people don't know, it's the administration's fault. Coffee is going up because it's the administration's fault. But not necessarily. There's a lot of things happening in the world as we do, and that also impacts, like I just said, it has lots of impact. So who are the winners? Well, the consumer of imported goods should be the winners, like coffee drinkers, fruit buyers, chocolate lovers, lots of people. The food manufacturers, companies using imported cocoa, spices, citrus, may see relief. Exporters in Latin America and India, countries like Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, India, Guatemala, benefit from easier access to U.S. market. And of course, the grocery chains. Who are going to be the losers? Well, the U.S. domestic beef producers are going to be not going to like it. In fact, you probably heard already, because the administration is going to favor importing Argentinian beef into the U.S. Basically saying, well, hold on, you know, now you're going to have cheaper imported beef. There's going to mean more competition for us. So you're going to hear the beef producers having an issue. The farmer protected by the tariffs. Some may see reduced prices or thinner margins. Political allies who supported Trump's original tariff strategy. They say, well, what are you doing? What are you reversing? And of course, those of you tariffs as negotiation leverage may feel weakened. Right? So now, why is this happening? Well, it's happening because time is passing by. And you can't, when it first came out, it was all new, brand new. You could also say, well, it's not my fault, it's the other guy's fault, it's the other guy's fault, it's the other guy's fault. I'm doing the tariffs. Wow, what a great thing. This is working. We're making money, right? But now time is kicking in. Events are happening beyond their control. And now, of course, they're stuck. And now they have to make sure. I don't think they care so much about the price of anything. They want to make sure, like everyone would, you know, the right or the left. They want to make sure that the message comes across as, I am trying, look what I'm doing. I'm actually doing it. Now, are you going to see it? Probably not. At least not as much as you think. The thing is, are you going to think that the reason why it's high is because of the tariffs? Or you're going to be a knowledgeable person, and that's why I want you to use this channel to understand what's happening because it always impacts the stock market. At the end of the day, as you could see, the market is not doing well, at least not today. So why do tariffs matter so much for food? Well, food prices are uniquely sensitive because they are purchased frequently. They are highly visible. They form a psychological inflation anchor, right? You go every day to the store. This is what's really happening. You go to the store every day, you see prices going up and up and up. You're saying we have inflation. People compare food prices week to week, month to month. You have to be very careful. Because if you feel that things are getting more expensive, then you're going to want to get paid more money. You're going to expect more money. And then if all your employers, especially as we know now, the economy is pretty strong at 3% GDP, and they come to you and they say, we want to pay more money, otherwise I'm moving out and I'm going to the competition, you want to retain your workers, you're going to pay them more money because they feel that things are more expensive. And therefore, when it's time for you to sell the widget that these employers, these workers are doing for you, you're going to raise your own prices. And then it goes on, and this is a sticky thing about this inflation. So food form a cycle. People compare food prices week to week. This is why every president, not just Trump, but Bush, Obama, Biden, eventually faces the same pressure. Time is kicking in now. Make grocery cheaper. Well, make the groceries cheaper, but here's a deeper economic reality. Presidents have very limited tool to influence food prices. So the only thing that they have is they got to sell you the message that they are trying the best they can. Will you believe it? I mean, besides the tariffs, they have regulatory adjustments, emergency supply releases. You could negotiate corporate agreements. They could trade deals, but they cannot control weather patterns. They cannot control global commodity markets. I mean, coffee is going up because there's been some pretty bad diseases going on and the weather. Same thing happening with the meat in the U.S. There's been diseases going in. Droughts, plant diseases, global shipping costs, packaging and labor, retail margin, farming conditions abroad. So what is this going to mean for Trump's economic strategy? Well, that's a major strategic shift. And you may not see any results, which means you may not like it, which means when it comes down to the midterm election, you might do what you did in recently, right, where all these Democrats moved in. That's what they're worried about. So originally, the strategy, the U.S. administration strategy was built around tariffs, trade leverage, protectionism, and America First economic nationalism. Nothing wrong with that. All the other countries are doing it. Rolling back 200 plus food tariff is effectively an admission that tariffs are contributing to high grocery prices. And this is where it's a double whammy. Because you are changing it, then people are saying, oh, so it does cause, so your tariffs are causing inflation prices on the food items. And I will tell you, you're not going to see such a huge increase, which means you're not going to like it, which means that's going to have an impact on the elections at the end of the year. And obviously for the stock market, if the administration is not able to do what they do, it's going to be a mess. And of course, let's not forget what I've been saying all along. They also wanted to reduce inflation. But they wanted to reduce the interest rates, which they have succeeded. One thing you cannot have. You cannot have lower interest rates and inflation. That is a bad combination. So even if the administration never says those words explicitly, the policy speaks for itself. And of course, the White House is now racing to build new agreements, new trade frameworks with Argentina, where they said, bring your beautiful Argentinian beef, right? Ecuador, Guatemala, El Salvador, India. Affordability has become the defining political issue. That's going to be very sticky, and that's going to be a lot of damage because that's not going to make much of a difference. What they're doing, though, you're going to hear a lot of them going on all the news channels and station. They're going to be out there telling you, we are doing it. We are going to work. Look what I'm doing. We're going to make deals with all these people. Unfortunately, that's not going to make much of a difference. And hopefully, they're hoping that by the time June comes along and you start to vote again, you'll have that in mind that they tried, but the price is not going to go down. What I don't like, and this is what's going to impact the stock market, obviously, is that they're also getting what they want, which is lower rates. And that's why maybe you're not going to get such low rates in December. And that means that it's going to be a problem for the stock market because the stock market is expecting lower rates. And if it doesn't get it, it ain't going to like it. So what happens next? Well, this is what you need to watch out for the next couple of months. I'll watch it with you and do more lives, but obviously you need to watch it for yourself as well, is that import volume spikes. If tariffs are lowered, more products will enter the U.S. We should see lower cost for items like coffee beans, bananas, certain fruit juices, cocoa, and spices. I said lower cost. I didn't see we're going to revert back to what you were paying before. Consumer prices may take months to adjust, if at all. So wholesale prices may go down, but you may not see it. What does that mean? It means that you make a deal with Argentina, you're paying less. When I say you, not you, they, the importers. And then they're going to make more money. And then they're going to look around, they're going to say, what's going on? Are people buying the meat regardless? Well, let's give them a little something. And the problem is that the administration cannot go after all of those little manufacturers all over the place. I mean, if you're a GM, it's one thing. You know, if you're NVIDIA, you could go after, or Intel, they could go after you, for what they did. But if you're a bunch of thousands of small, it's almost impossible, and they know it. Farm state senators and agricultural lobbies may push back hard, and they're probably already doing it. They say, what are you doing? You're allowing the Argentinian beef to come into the country, and it's already expensive as it is, and people don't want to buy the beef in the U.S. I mean, last time I checked, I think the ribeye at Costco was like, I don't know, $23 a pound from $17. So that's a lot of money. So you don't want to pay for that, right? So you're going to see, Argentinian beef. I'm going to go for that instead. But they're going to the beef manufacturers in the U.S. say, listen, it has nothing to do with the tariffs. We have had diseases. We have competition. Blah blah blah. We won't be able to lower. We won't be able to compete. What are you doing? Countries benefiting from tariff relief may reciprocate. Even slight drop in both CPI could help the administration politically. So that could help. I mean, at least the CPI, you may not see it in your plate, but at least if the CPI drops, they go say, look, inflation is going down. Okay, so what do you want from me? But remember, inflation is three things: food, housing, and energy. So they could play with the energy and the housing, but the food. But the biggest question remains, and it's this: will Americans feel prices going down? Because politically, perception matters more than CPI charts. So the president has built his legacy on tariffs, has just undone a massive portion of them. Not because of international pressure, but because American families are struggling under the weight of the grocery bills. Where is the food? I am hungry. The tariff rollback is bold. It's dramatic. It's politically risky. Why is it politically risky? Because on one end, you may not see it. On the other end, I mean, you may not see the actual price. You're going to check every week. But also, by the fact alone that they decided to tie the tariffs, right, with inflation, with the food prices, they're saying, they're linked. That's why I'm doing something about it. So why would you do that to us then? Did you make a mistake? No, I didn't make a mistake. But what you don't understand is prices were going to go up regardless. Now, He could have said, you know what, I'm not lowering it. I don't care, because I know for a fact that I could see exactly the discussion they had in the White House. They came to him and they said to him, okay, people feel that the tariffs are creating inflation, that they're creating the food inflation. And he said, but it's not. Well, I know it's not, but that's what they think. So you need to do something about it. They say, but if I do something about it, they're going to think and they're going to realize that, in fact, it is tied. But that's okay, because at least you're doing something. And if they hear you doing something, then they're going to reward you. And then he's probably said, but it's not going to make a difference. Yeah, but by that time, you know, the message has been sent already. You see how tricky this is? That's exactly what's happening. So obviously, he caved. I am telling you that he caved. They pressured him and he caved, because that's not his temperament. He goes all the way. Now, of course, he may be caving from anything. In fact, he's caving also on the Epstein thing, by the way, where first he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to have this vote. Now he's saying, yeah, we should have the vote. Whoa, another reversal. Is he weakening? Is there something going on? And that's a problem, because that's obviously going to stop the stock market, because if you have no one in charge now, that is a problem. That is a problem. So I want you to be aware of this. I want you to understand it. So his legacy on tariff has just undone a massive portion of them, not because of international pressure, but because of the struggle in what's going on. The cost of living has become the defining issue in America. And even the White House knows it, and it cannot ignore the grocery aisle. But unfortunately, it also knows that it's not going to make a big difference, because it's not necessarily caused by the tariffs. But now you're seeing a war. You're going to see a lot of them out there talking all the time, telling you, we're doing it. I'm doing deal with this guy, with Argentina, and we're going to lower, and let's see what happens. You may see a CPI change, but you won't know if it's caused because of energy prices going down, or if it's because of housing going on, or because of CPI. And that is the White House. So that is why I'm saying the White House is panicking, because of this huge, massive food tariff reversal. And I'm also saying that the president might be losing grip and control. And if he doesn't control this whole thing like he has from the beginning, and the stock market reflected it, right? Went up. See that this could have a negative. So I want you to think about these things and realize what's going on. So now, what I want to talk about, something that is it's different, something that's a little bit out there. But let's talk about what's going on in Venezuela. Let's talk about what's going on in Venezuela, and not just Venezuela, by the way. There's been some discussion in Nigeria and other country, small countries. What is the U.S. doing with these type of activity? Okay, the mainstream headlines have shown only fragments. You know, you've seen the boats, right, exploding. Okay, so wait, the guy that was in charge of this area at the in the army, you know, the chief, I think he was the guys in charge of all Latin America. He retired. He didn't like what he was seeing. So, but when you connect the dot, a much larger story emerges. A story about America projecting military force in the Caribbean. Why? Well, they've been launching deadly strikes on small vessels. There's a story of a secret legal memo. This clashing with longtime anti-drug allies. The UK say, "Whoa, what are you doing?" First, you know, one of the general left, and some of the allies are saying, "I'm giving you information, but what are you doing?" Simultaneously entering a dangerous new nuclear arm race with both Russia and China. That's also happening at the same time. They're all emptying up the antes here. So this is not one isolated issue. This is a multi-front escalation, and it raises a fundamental question. Is the United States being pulled or pushed toward a level of conflict we haven't seen in decades? let's find out what's going on. So over the past weeks, the United States has moved its largest aircraft carrier. Okay. Yeah, too many of those. The USS General Ford into the waters near Venezuela. This is serious. You don't move this thing around for no reason. This is expensive. This is visible. This is big. This isn't a routine deployment. This isn't a training rotation. And this is definitely isn't the type of ship that normally shows up for narcotic operations. Fine, you were killing a bunch of drug dealers, but now you're moving. This is a super carrier. This is a floating city. It's a power projection platform. And it's got guided missile cruisers, destroyers, submarines, electronic warfare aircraft. And F-35 strike fighters, when you deploy that level of force, you're signaling something huge. The Maduro government immediately declared the move a historical threat. What are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing? What am I doing? I mean, they mobilized some troops, but what are they going to do? They activated militia units and they warned that the U.S. were preparing a regional intervention. It's political theater, yes, but the deployment itself is not theater. This is not fake. The ship is over there. It's a real hardware. It's real firepower. It's real escalation, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. If you looked at my previous live, you will see that this thing has been building up slowly. Right? It happened during a wave of U.S. military actions at sea. And don't forget, they're also kind of eyeballing Nigeria because they say you're killing Christians down there as well. So, earlier this year, the U.S. started conducting lethal strikes on small boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. Okay? Both suggested smuggling drugs. But instead of the usual interdiction tactics, which other administrations have done, you could have boarded the teams, you could have, make sure that there were drugs and there were a bunch of tourists or whatever, arrests. There were direct strikes. You just blew them out of the water. I guess so, but, missile strikes, drone strikes, gunship strikes, at least 20 separate operations. This is serious. And scores of fatalities. Many U.S. partners in the region had no idea these strikes were happening. Colombia, one of America's closest counter-drug allies, openly protested. Some naval partners quietly pulled back. And intelligence sharing, because, what do you think? How do you think the U.S. knows that these boats are going all over? People are talking. You're having intelligence, Latin America intelligence. So intelligence sharing that began to break down. So because the U.S. wasn't just disrupting cargo vessels, they were killing everyone on board without warning, without partner coordination, and without presenting evidence publicly for each vessel met the threshold for legal action. That's triggering alarm bells across Latin America. What's going on? Right? What is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on is the U.S. is, practicing. Practicing for what exactly? Not sure. But you have to realize that whenever you move a ship and you're doing these activities and you're firing with the missiles, right? You may or may not know, but during World War I, when they start using mustard gas, for example, to kill the troops in the trenches, they learned a lot on how to fight, what worked, what didn't work. They realized, hey, you know what? That's how we should do things. You have to test. When they wanted to go to the moon, right? What did they do? They put a dog called Laika. They put a bunch of monkeys, right, to test, to see what works and what doesn't work. That is exactly what they're doing here. I am telling you. Because the U.S. hasn't gone into a major confrontation in a long time. It has a huge amount of hardware and men willing to fight. But, this whole thing has to work together. Don't forget, right now, China and Russia are doing war games in the China Sea. What is the U.S. doing? I mean, they're trying to do a couple of war games with the quads in with Japan and Australia and India to a certain extent, but it hasn't worked that well. So, because so all this has triggered alarm bells across Latin America. And it didn't stop there, because behind these strikes was something even bigger. There seemed to be a secret legal memo. The Washington Post, and listen to this, and others reported that the Justice Department drafted a classified memo giving the U.S. military expensive legal justification for these strikes. So basically what the memo says, first, it declares that the U.S. is in a non-international armed conflict with narcotics trafficking organization. That's a massive shift. So it reframes drug traffickers not as criminal, but as enemy combatants. Whoa. Second, it argues that synthetic drugs like fentanyl represent a danger comparable to chemical weapons. Now, you could see the stretch here, right? I mean, it's chemical warfare. Well, hold on. Yeah, it's chemically induced euphoria through drugs. But drugs are not chemical weapons. Yes, they are, because they're killing Americans. Yeah, you could see the stretch, right? Wording matters. Because of this threat is treated as a chemical weapon threat. I mean, don't laugh about it, but that's what they did. The U.S. government can't classify interdiction as a wartime operation rather than law enforcement. Third, the memo asserts that U.S. troops involved in these strikes are immune from prosecution. Even if civilians were killed, even if the intelligence was wrong, and even if partners' nations objected. We're at war. Somebody is attacking us with chemical weapons. The memo lays the legal foundation for a new era of militarized drug operations with fewer checks, fewer reporting requirements, and fewer diplomatic constraints. Leave us alone. We are working. What are you doing? What we're doing, quote unquote, is we're preparing. I'm learning how to move my airport carrier to my right. I mean, I'm moving my carrier across the world. We're coordinating with ships. We're coordinating with men on the ground. We're learning communication techniques. Of course, they don't tell you everything. All you have to go by, right, is what you see. Well, you definitely see the bombing, okay? You heard somehow of a leaked memo. And the memo, obviously, is good to be leaked because it's basically telling everyone, whoa, listen, you know what? This is chemical warfare, so we could do whatever we want. So don't leave us alone. Okay. The U.S. is now framing part of the drug war as an actual war, but there is no actual war. So what's the point? The point is you're practicing for an actual war, like I've been saying for a while. It represents a seismic shift in American policy. So it's great. The only thing is there is a cost to do these type of things, especially with the allies. Because suppose something goes wrong. So you know, you may lose your allies. Well, yeah, but what you guys don't know is there's something cooking, and we really can't talk about it, but we have to be prepared for it. So for decades, the U.S. has relied on cooperation with countries like Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, and others. Joint patrols, shared intelligence, coordinated interdictions, mutual prosecution agreements. That network was the backbone of the anti-drug mission. But the new strikes without partner approval has shaken that foundation. Say, what are you doing? Okay. Several governments have said privately they feel blindsided. What is the U.S. doing? Some believe the U.S. is using drug trafficking as a pretext for broader political or military objectives. Now, obviously, a lot of them are worried that, well, wow, they're going to invade South America. No, there's none of that. Other fears they could be held legally responsible if the U.S. conducts lethal operation in or near their waters. You have to understand, you can't just shoot people out of the, from the sky in the water, and some are simply unwilling to be connected to potentially unlawful or extrajudicial killings. Meanwhile, Venezuela claimed these strikes are cover for hostile military operation against its government. I don't believe so. I don't think that the U.S. wants to invade Venezuela and what, they're going to steal their oil? The U.S. has plenty of oil. They don't need anybody's oil. And while that claim is politically convenient for Maduro, it's a problem. It's a problem. And I'll tell you why. It's a problem. That the U.S. Korea deployment nearby doesn't help calm things, right? You have this huge thing off the coast of Venezuela. All of this creates fracture in once unified alliance. I thought we were friends. Well, things have changed. I mean, hopefully you'll realize we are not in Kansas anymore, right? Now, why we're not in Kansas? Well, we don't really know exactly yet, but I think that the U.S. is preparing for something major, right? The U.S. is escalating action at sea. Another escalation is unfolding across the world. It's a nuclear escalation. And I'll explain. For the first time in modern history, the U.S. is facing simultaneous nuclear pressure from two peer-level adversaries. Now, when we talk about Russia and China, we're not talking about Venezuela. Both are expanding their arsenals. Both modernizing their delivery system. Both developing new weapons outside existing arms control treaties. Russia still holds the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Deploying new hypersonic system. Join this channel because what we're doing, we're trying to understand what's happening in the world to see how it's going to impact our livelihood, our food prices, our stock market. You need to know what's going on in the world, folks. Otherwise, what's the point? China is testing undersea nuclear drones. Is threatening new testing cycles. China is building hundreds of new missile silos, expanding to an estimated 1,000+ warhead by 2030. If you're going to build it, you build it for no reason, and there's a strategic problem. The U.S. nuclear deterrent was designed for one major adversary world, not two. A world where only Russia represented a nuclear peer threat. But now the U.S. faces two. This forces America into a new nuclear logic. If the U.S. wants to maintain a credible deterrent against both Russia and China, it may need more warheads, more practice, more submarines, more bombers, more ICBMs, more command and control redundancy. And this is exactly what experts describe as a tripolar arms race. And that is what they are doing in South America. They want to do maybe even in Nigeria, believe it or not. No treaties, no guardrails, and no diplomatic process. And this is not theoretical, by the way. This is happening. Right now, it intersects with the events in the Caribbean because when a superpower increases global military operation, the risk of miscalculation rises everywhere. So how are these all interconnected, right? What the heck? What's going on? Well, U.S. Navy escalation near Venezuela. 1. Lethal drug boat strikes backed by a secret memo. 2. Growing nuclear race with Russia and China. 3. Together they form a pattern of heightened military posture. Expanded legal interpretation, forward deployment of assets, and erosion of in diplomatic channels. We're not talking, we're just doing it. Here's a bigger picture. The U.S. is projecting force in the Western Hemisphere. Allies are becoming uneasy with unilateral decision. Venezuela is mobilizing. Russia and China are watching and adjusting their own posture. Say, well, this guy's not messing around. He's serious. Arms control treaties are collapsing. Nuclear modernization is accelerating. Now, of course, by doing all this, expecting something, you may be creating that thing that you're expecting, by the way, because they say, whoa, the U.S. is, we got to do something. Drug interdiction is becoming militarized. Intelligence ties are weakening. Escalation risks are rising. This is not just about a single strike, not about a single carrier, a single memo. It's about a accumulation of actions. That's what's happening. So what happens next? But what's going to happen next? Well, one, in Venezuela, any miscalculation, aircraft buzzing a ship, misread radar contact, could ignite a confrontation. And then someone will go in to say, hey, what is the U.S. doing? We got to get in there. What do you mean? Leave us alone. No, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to do something. Two, more boat strikes. If the U.S. conducts more lethal interdiction, regional backlash could intensify. Three, Congress and the memo. If Congress pushes for declassification, political pressure will skyrocket. And that's what they're complaining about Congress. This is, guys, I mean, get involved, no? Because don't forget, if you let the administration do what they want to do and it doesn't work out, that's going to be a problem for you, because don't forget, we also have the midterm elections coming up. And we have the Epstein coming in, what we'll talk about after in this live. And we'll talk about again later on. So Russia and China's nuclear move, they're doing new test deployment, joint exercises. And then finally, U.S. Strategic Posture Review. If the Pentagon signals major nuclear expansion, that will confirm the start of a formal tripolar arms race. So what does this whole mean in closing? Well, we are in a global moment with multiple crises, overlapping. You got drug policy, military readiness, regional instability, domestic politics. Don't forget, we still have with inflation, nuclear strategy, great power competition, and legal justification the public never voted on. No single headline tells a story. No single soundbite explains it. But the United States is entering a more dangerous strategic environment than any time since the end of the Cold War. Well, you came out gun blazing like everything else, and what's going on with the food prices going up, which probably some has to do with the tariffs, but not all of it. And the thing is, the world is moving, and you're making action, and you have ripple effects, and whatever you do will impact everything else. So the stakes are rising faster than most people realize. And I want my subscribers, and that's why I want you to join this channel, I want my subscribers to realize what's happening. I want you to understand what is a possibility, because if there's some kind of a war conflict, forget the work, forget the job, forget the stock market. So, the signals are flashing red, and the alliances are straining, the legal boundaries are shifting, and nuclear power's posture is moving. The margin for error shrinks dramatically, and the world is watching to see what happens next. If I'm looking at this thing, you could imagine what China and the other guy is doing. Okay, so that is what you need to worry about. Now, I won't say let's have some fun, but let's lighten up if we could call it that. I want to talk about next about Epstein, because that is a lot of damage. And the reason it is, I will explain to you. So what's going on? What's going on with the Epstein file? And I will tell you that it's amazing. So tomorrow is the 218 vote. People are going to vote, right? They've got the votes for the 218 votes. So tomorrow they're going to vote to release more information. What does that mean? Well, that's those votes that are terrifying Washington, Wall Street, and Buckingham Palace. So let's unpack it. Now, what I'm telling you is happening from the get-go is don't be focused so much on the individual this time around. Well, he did this and he did that, and where was he on the night of, and he's guilty, he's no good. Don't think about it. I think this time around, they are going to go after the institutions. So United States House of Representatives, the discharge petition have been secured. It forces a bill out of committee and onto the floor for a full vote. Force it? What do you mean force? It means a force because originally the Speaker of the House did not want to bring this on the floor. Why not? Because they say we release enough information. The president didn't want to do it anymore, although now he wants to. This is creating unnecessary noise because we know everything there is. And frankly, Giuffre, for example, she said that the president had nothing to do with anything. And neither did when she was interviewed in Miami by the assistant district attorney. Ghislaine Maxwell had nothing. She said, no, nobody did anything. In fact, I didn't do anything either. So they say, oh, they're lying. You see, that's what you need to realize, that if the Democrats are going after particular individuals, nobody's going to go to jail, frankly. It's going to be a wasted opportunity. You need to go after the institution. At the end of the day, what they should ask for is, how did he make his money? We still don't know how he made his money. Let's think about that for a second. So they're going to force that bill out of committee, right, onto the floor for a full vote. Today, that petition is tied to the push for transparency, the release of records and documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein, his network, his associates, and his finances. They're not looking for the list. Forget the list. You can't listen to what they're telling you all the time. It's not about the list of all the people that, my list and they did all these things. No. Because there is no list. But there are transactions. In fact, some of them are starting to come out in some of the emails that you've seen. And we're going to have to talk about the prince again, the former prince, because he may actually bring down the whole monarchy in the UK because of what he did. Because obviously they're saying, well, you guys didn't know anything? Now there's reports that he was out there in Thailand when he was in charge of the UK international business connections as part of his role, right? He actually took an entire 5-star resort and you did you know what. So on the UK's taxpayers' dimes, okay? So essentially, the release of those records and documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein. So they want to know the finances. That's the question. So this is not just one man anymore. It's about the power, the privilege, and the secrecy and the system that protected themselves. But now I'm telling you, that might be done. That might be over because lots of people want to know. Washington and Wall Street are under pressure. So how is it going to play out in Washington? Certain members of Congress are pressing hard for disclosure, including the top one MAGA person, Taylor Greene, right, was being completely discredited by the president. She was one of the people that signed that petition. One of the few Republicans that did. Their argument: the public has a right to see how elite networks operate, how institutions fail, and how oversight may have been lacking. Not just in the US, we're also talking in the UK. Now, you're seeing it more in the UK because they're further down the US, but the same thing that's happening over there is going to happen over here. Mark my words. Right? They took the prince out of the prince business. They took him out of his 30-room mansion. And now not only they said you can't use your title, you don't even have your titles, and we're removing it from you. So don't say you're not using them. That's not good enough anymore. You're out. And now they're looking at all the deals, all the things that he was allowed to do by the queen and by the current king. And frankly, they've got a lot to answer themselves. Why did you allow him to do the things that he did? Why did you didn't know? You did not know. And now, of course, these emails are coming out. Those people are talking. And they said, he did all these. He invited prostitutes to Buckingham Palace. No, that can't be true. This is hearsay. Okay, fine. And this is hearsay. And everything is hearsay. Emails are coming out. Be careful. On Wall Street and in finance, the stakes are likewise high. Why? Because Epstein's connection weren't only personal. They were transactional. They were investment, partnership deals, access to elite circles. Releasing the files threatens to expose shadow, the money and the influence. This is why that 218 votes is extremely important. So Buckingham Palace and the monarchy, for a bit of fun, quote unquote, the scandal touches another realm, the British monarchy. Allegations have emerged suggesting, listen to this, that royal residences and networks may have been used in ways that blur the line between privilege and impunity. And don't forget, the monarchy is basically working for the people, meaning that they're using, what do you think they make their money from? They get, part of the taxes are being paid to them to do all these things that they do. They have an important role, but if you're using that role to go out and let him do whatever he did with the Buckingham Palace, and forget the prostitutes, he also, which is amazing, and I knew one of the guys, by the way, that went there, allowed these people to go in, right? To go in, and basically, I think they charge like $1 million to go and visit Buckingham Palace, to a group of blockchain, crypto deal that was kind of went south. I mean, it didn't sound great to begin with. So the institution that represents centuries of ceremonial power is facing unprecedented scrutiny. This is not over. If the U.S. records expose institutional enablers on networks of access, the ripple effect goes far beyond one country. I believe that what's happening right now, they're going after the institutions. Yes. Forget the individuals. Because, unless you quit on your own, like, for example, okay, they took away his title, they pressured the king to get rid of everything that his brother had. The guy that lost his job recently was the ambassador to the U.S. From the UK. And there was some email, and basically he was saying he doesn't understand. It was an email that was addressed to Epstein after he was indicted, saying, I don't understand what they're doing to you. This is not fair. You're a good guy, blah, blah, blah. And not that he himself had anything to do with the girls because of his, his inclination, of his sexual inclination. It was just that he basically said that he was basically a friend of, and even there was also an email from the former wife of former Prince Andrew, that basically said, after again Epstein was indicted, basically saying that, what, we're sorry we have to talk to you like this in public, but you have to understand, I have a children's book coming out, an email. I'm saying I don't like you, but frankly, I do like you at the end of the day. So more pressure. And then, of course, now coming out the fact that he went out on a trip. So inside the one key shift in this story is the focus is less on one bad actor and more on the institution and the system that allow abuse to happen. That's a major one. So we're going to see investigation into financial networks and platform of access. 2, questions about government oversight, law enforcement responses, and institutional inertia. A push to hold not just individual accountable, but to examine the architecture of elite privilege itself. How would they allowed? Why would for example, why would the founder, Les Waxler, right? He was the founder of the Limited. Why would he allow Epstein to have full control over his affairs? Why would the former head, Leon Black, $156 million he gave him to take care of his taxes. So inside the congressional drama is a high-stake political background as well. With the president and certain key Republicans, I framed the push for disclosure as a distraction, although that has changed since then. So you know what? Yes, I want that to be released. So some lawmakers are buckled under pressure. Others are signing the discharge petition despite the risk. This is a major, and of course it's coming months before the midterm elections. That could have a humongous impact, right? This could have a humongous impact on the elections in May, June, July. Be careful. Now, why should you care, right? Well, because this vote and the documents behind it tomorrow challenge the idea that there are two sets of rules, one for citizens and one for the powerful. If the files are released, and again, it was part of the administration agenda originally, besides the tariffs. If the files are released, they could shed light on how institutions protect themselves. Don't forget, they wanted to bring JP Morgan's CEO, and it's still possible, to Congress to answer a question. Bank of America is being sued, Bank of New York, because you financed this guy while you knew he was guilty. How access is broken and how power preserves itself. If the vote fails, that's going to be a problem. It sends a message that even a majority press's elite institution can still shield themselves. And don't forget, the president needs to sign that act of Congress, by the way, which now he says he will sign. So what do we need to track? Well, we need to track who's supporting, who's not supporting, what document is going to be happening, how the monarchy and other global constitutions responds. This is major. This is major as far as what's going on with the Epstein story, because there's a lot of things that are happening that frankly is not clear. Right? And again, evidence of institutional systemic focus. There's a name for it. It's called the Epstein Files Transparency Act, HR 4405. Is not just targeting a single person. That's one thing you have to realize. It will require the U.S. Department of Justice to release all documents relating to Epstein. Of course, they're going to have a problem, right? Because they say, but we release everything already. Now, this also, you have to realize, this could be a bit like the food situation, meaning that, lowering the tariffs are going to lower food prices. Well, you have to understand that, okay, you want everything? I'm going to release all the information, but we can't just put unredacted information out there. You may never be able to actually use it. Some leading members of Congress argue that the problem goes deeper. It's about how system of power and elite have turned a blind eye, right? The push for transparency include flight logs, financial records. That's why I think at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to indict anyone because, they're going to say, well, I went with this guy and I did this. Or blank the name of the woman, blank the name of the guy. You'll never know who did anything, right? That's why I don't think that anybody is going to be indicted. People are going to be very disappointed if they think they're going to see reams and reams of gory details of what they did to each other, because all of the victims' names are going to be blanked out. Virginia Giuffre, right? She wrote a book recently, and she was going to name a bunch of people, and they weren't allowed to put it in there because you're going to get sued. You can't just say all these things about people just like that. No, that's not going to happen. But one thing is possible is that one thing you can't remove the name of the bank, right? You can't blank that out. That's going to be the difference. The difference is that you'll be able to see. They're going to, for example, that push for transparency is going to include flight logs, financial records, call logs, institutional communication, not only for the name of the individuals, right, but also the cash ledgers, the call logs of the Epstein estate. You're going to see where the money came from. How did he end up having $600 million? He wasn't the greatest stock picker in the world. He wasn't even a CPA. Right? So, and of course, the administration response is also framed in institutional terms, because the president asked the DOJ to investigate Epstein involvement and relationship with other people and institutions. So by focusing on institution rather than only individuals, that's a very important distinction and strategically significant. Lawmakers and advocates are aiming for structural accountability. You can't remove the name of the bank. Right? It's not a victim. So how did the system allow this to happen? How did he make $600 million? What did these people give him all that money? How did he? Because it's been coming slowly through other means, and especially with the emails. But basically, they were like, whenever someone would visit the place, it would a $10,000 withdrawal from his account, not 10,000, actually like 9,000, and then the money would go back in, and then another 8,000. Always keep it below 10,000 because anything above $10,000 cash transactions get recorded. So they kept it under 10. But of course, if you do 10 every 10 minutes or 10 every day, then they'll say, well, what's going on? How come you didn't say anything? Didn't you see all those transactions? Why didn't you flag this? Well, I kind of flagged it, but because he was an important customer, we kind of let it go. But did you know what you're allowed to happen by you allowing this transaction to go on and on and on and on? And that is what the problem is. So they want to know the role that the networks of power play. It makes the problem harder to sideline as a one bad actor. It's his fault. Forget that. It implicates broader network, institution, and possibly policy failures. It raises stake politically, obviously, because institutions are more diffuse and harder to defend than a single person. From a victim perspective, focusing on institutional failing offers a pathway to reform rather than just this retribution. Plus, of course, I mean, you have to look at that aspect as well, is that if you're suing a large bank, there's money there. If you're suing to put someone in jail, well, good luck. There are plenty of money. I mean, you have to prove all these things. But an institution, for example, institution is the former ambassador to the U.S. He just quit. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. And if you're being sued by all of these women all over again, and it's a lot more than we think, you'll just settle. I'll pay, I settle. That's what institutions do. So obviously there's more. So everyone is incentivized to keep this thing going because you're going to make some money. You're going to get retribution. We're going to make changes, right? Of course, the people that are going to get hit is the institutions or whomever is preventing it from happening. For the longest time, the president was saying, well, I mean, this is ridiculous. There's no reason, blah, blah, blah. But now, you know what? Let's go for it. And no, why would he do that? I think he's doing it because, frankly, it's a humongous amount of information, and it's taking everyone, taking the balls away, the attention away from what he's trying to get done. Even Virginia Giuffre said that the president, he was the nicest guy ever. He's trying to get things moving, but unfortunately, by him saying no, it looks like, why you have something to hide, which is not the case. So the institutional focus is rising. Key individuals are under scrutiny. Politically, much of the public interest continues to ask, who knew what and which institution? So there is a clear shift. Overall, there is a meaningful shift toward institutional systemic focus, and it's not exclusive. The story retains its individual dimension and personality, but the narrative is broadening, and that's why it's very hard to contain. The institutional lens gives it more longevity and a bigger why. And of course, the Democrats will obviously love this because the longer this goes on and on and on and on, the closer you get to the midterm election, the more difficult it's going to be to say no. I mean, when you have Taylor Greene, which is a major MAGA person, that decided against it, right? She basically voted one of those few, because a lot of Republicans were under pressure not to vote for something like that, the 218 votes. And maybe she's opportunistic, maybe she sees the wind moving. She says, well, I love the president, but I still want to, I don't think it's right. And she signed it, and she lost his support. But the MAGA situation has been broken. The MAGA diamond has been broken because some of them are saying, we got to do something. We just can't let this happen and say nothing. And that is that's going to be the problem, right? Now, as far as the prince is concerned, okay, the prince has been on. I mean, there's nothing much left of him, right? I mean, between the report that Andrew regularly brought prostitutes into Buckingham Palace over several years. It's based on his story in New Book. I mean, and it has not been independently verified by the palace. Basically, they're saying, can we not talk about this anymore? Okay, so he's gone. But what about you? Why did you allow this? Were you an enabler? Did you allow it? Right? Now, October 2025, the king and the palace announced formal process to strip him from his royal titles. Okay, so you're going after him, but you don't realize that now we are going after you. And that's the thing that's going to be a problem for everyone. We are going after the institution. And in this case, we are going after the institution of the monarchy. In June 2019, okay, Andrew organized a private tour of Buckingham Palace while the Queen was in residence by two American businessmen. And I knew one of them. He's an interesting guy, and I could see how he got into this situation. From the crypto mining firm, some crypto mining, doesn't matter the name. But they were also driven through the palace gates in his car, then attended the Pitch Palace event at St. James Palace, and later joined dinner with Andrew, his ex-wife Sarah, and daughter Beatrice. So, and for that, they got paid £1.4 million. So you see how far it goes, because if anybody were watching him or care about what he was doing, you say, what the heck are you doing? What are you doing? And he did it several times, over and over. And the latest one is this trip that he used to go to Thailand. And forget about it. This is even more wilder. No need to discuss, because we're making our point. The point being is that institutions are going to be impacted over and over and over. You could remove all his titles, but at the end of the day, that is what the government here, especially Congress, needs to worry about, because they need to come across clean. So whomever is trying to stop this thing from happening is going to be in a lot of trouble, I think. So let's make sure that we understand what is going on. But at the end of the day, that is going to be... So since we're talking about you, and that one is a doozy. Okay. I want to talk about the... I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the 50-year mortgage and the $2,000 tariff refund. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the $2,000 refund and the 50-year mortgage. That That you need to know. You need to know about this $2,000 refund and the 50-year mortgage that is being offered. Now, what is this all about? Well, essentially, it's amazing. Essentially, what we're talking about the fact that now we could have a 50-year mortgage. You know, does it make sense? Well, yeah, of course it makes sense, because it's going to make it more affordable to buy a house. So the U.S. mortgage are most commonly for 30 years. A 50-year mortgage means the loan is amortized over 50 years, so your payments are less. That's great. The idea is by spreading the principal over a long period, the monthly payments go down, making ownership somewhat more affordable in the short term. That makes total sense to me. Well, I'm joking, obviously, but so basically, let's say you have a $400,000 mortgage, right? And you put 20% down, 6% interest over 30 years. You save about $200 a month. But, so you're saving $200, right? Sounds great. What's wrong with that? But over the life of the loan, you end up paying much more interest because you're borrowing for longer. In this particular case, the interest cost is going to be $400,000 on the 30-year mortgage. Before a 50-year mortgage is going to be $751,000, almost double. So a 50-year term, the homeowner builds equity much more slowly, and this is a problem. The potential benefits is basically you're going to have lower monthly payments. It may help somewhat with affordability in the terms of cash flow, and it will expand the pool of the buy. But obviously, if more people are buying, then the prices of the houses are going to go up. Much higher total interest costs over the life of the loan. The saving in monthly are relatively modest, while the long-term costs can balloon. So this is not a good idea. It's a scam. You're going to build slower equity since you're paying interest longer. You own less of the home after a decade. That reduces the wealth building aspect of whatever you're trying to do. If you start, say, at 35, 40 with a 50-year mortgage, you might not finish paying until you're 90 years old. This is ridiculous. Lenders will charge more to tie up funds for 50 years, so the amortized saving may shrink. The supply-demand consequences. Some analysts warn that easier financing might boost demand without addressing home supply constraint, meaning the improved affordability could be offset by higher purchase prices because you all want to buy a house because it's not costing you much money. In the U.S., the programs backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac currently are restricted in terms of no longer than 30 years. So that you're going to need regulatory change. I mean, it may help some buyers by lowering monthly payment burdens, but mostly it shifts when and how much you pay. That's all. And it's going to be more expensive over the long term. The monthly savings are very modest compared to your huge total costs you incur. But then again, do you actually know how much interest you're paying on your mortgage over time? You don't realize, because that itself is also a scam. The 30 years is kind of a scam as well. Because you're paying a lot of interest. And I don't know if you noticed, but when you have a mortgage, you pay the interest, right, first. And then after a while, you pay for the principal amount. So if many more buyers are able to borrow more because of monthly payment, then that would push up the prices, meaning you might pay more for the same home. Please don't listen to that. Then, of course, we've heard about the $2,000 tariff dividend. So basically, it was announced that basically using revenues from tariffs to give a one-time payout of at least $2,000 per person. You're going to get $2,000. So the fund would come from increased tariff collection under the trade policy and would function like a rebate dividend to individual or households. Now, you're going to hear that, but the serious people are not going to mention it, but like Bassett and these guys, right? Because they know that, Well, first of all, don't forget, the Supreme Court is deciding whether those tariffs are legal or not. And we don't know that for a fact yet. But of course, not for everyone. You will be eligible only if you make less than $100,000 a year. Okay, fine. First of all, what you need to know is this. The proposal is currently just that. It's a proposal. No legislation has been passed. No mechanism is set up. The revenue does not clearly cover the cost. We estimate that if 150 million adults qualify, the cost could be 300 billion or more. While tariff revenue for 2025 at 195 billion, where are you going to get the money? You can't even pay for it. Some of the tariffs measures underlying the revenues are being challenged and may be overturned, which could reduce the available funds. You're not going to get that $2,000. And of course, even if it goes through, many economists point out that the tariffs are ultimately borne by U.S. consumer through higher prices. What do you think is going on? What do you think caused the 2021 inflation when Biden basically flooded the economy with that money because people couldn't go to work, right? That created inflation. Keep in mind, 1, interest rates are going down. 2, the economy is growing at 3% GDP. 3, if you're going to give everybody $2,000, you're going to create even more inflation. So rebates may partially offset a burden, but they may also be but you're going to create inflation. Okay, there's no guarantee that you are going to receive $2,000. The idea is being floated, and the eligibility rules are unclear. The funding base is uncertain, and legislative authorization is needed. If next steps happen, it might target household, but still, it is very unclear, very uncertain. So I want you to understand and realize this, because that is you need to stop the scam.